Hey everybody, welcome to the video. Let's go over the 8-game MLB DFS slate for today on Draftkings. But before we continue, as always, if you guys could just leave a like, and if you're new to the channel, you might as well hit that subscribe button. I'm here all season long trying to help you guys become better MLB DFS players, and I cover other sports as well. So if you're going to keep coming back to the channel each and every single day, or each and every single week, you might as well hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss out whenever I post new content. You guys can follow me on social media. I'm at Pennell16 on Twitter, cpen16 over on IG. And if you miss more content over on Patreon, it's always much appreciated. We got 300 plus people there. You can hop into the Discord and just check out all the extra content that I put out during the entire day. I do other sports as well, like NASCAR, which is kind of the big thing I do. The projections, the spreadsheet, the article, all that fun stuff. Then we have the NBA going on as well. Then the NFL coming up very, very soon in about a month. So a lot to look forward to. So if you're interested, links in the description below. And if you're not, hey, that's fine. Let's just dive into today's slate. I'm also going to be running a NASCAR contest as well. So check out that video if you want to enter. But anyway, first thoughts on this slate. I think it's a good one. There's no Coors Field, which if you guys played Coors Field last night, you were probably sweating. Now, my entire lineup, so I went Paddock and Dunning. I said I was a little bit iffy on playing Dunning in cash games, but I just ended up saying, you know what, screw it. I'm gonna go cheap at pitcher today, and then I'm just gonna load up the bats. And look, Dunning was fine. He gave up 3 runs at the very end of the game, which, I mean, he was having a really, really good outing. 20 plus fantasy points, looked great. Then he gave up 3 runs in his last inning, which sucked, but he still scored around 14 fantasy points, which at 4,500. I'll take that all day. I was gonna be happy if he got me 5, to be honest. So Dunning did fantastic for his price tag. Paddock got us around 17. Unfortunately, didn't get the win at the end, which would have been really nice. But he still did fine. Garrett Cole did Garrett Cole things. Jacob deGrom did Jacob deGrom things. So pitching kind of worked out how we thought it would. DeGrom and Cole were the aces of the slates, and they scored over 20 fantasy points. And then everything else kind of fell in line. But like I was saying, my entire offense in my lineup was straight Coors. I went Butera, Jones, Hampson, Arenado, Story, Springer, who else? Kyle Tucker and Josh Reddick. So straight Coors. They were doing absolutely nothing for a long time. I don't believe the Astros started scoring until, around the 6th inning. But, I mean, it was just a hit parade after that. They scored 13 runs, and Kyle Tucker had, 2 triples and a homer. I mean, man, they took off late. Unfortunately, Trevor Story, Nolan Arenado did nothing. Absolutely nothing. But that's what happens sometimes. Baseball is a very high variance sport, and some things like that can happen. But still did fine with them in my lineup. But anyway, that's enough about last night. Just thought I'd share the Coors Field story because I'm sure a lot of you guys were sweating bullets as well if you've just full stack Coors because they were doing nothing for a while. But anyway, back into this slate. Pretty good for pitching. I mean, you got a lot of good options here. You have 3 aces, or even 4 aces if you want to call him an ace. I mean, he's been great this season too. He's just not priced like an ace. So just price-wise, the aces are Shane Bieber and Clayton Kershaw. Then you have Sonny Gray, Dinelson Lamet. Or Dinelson, I think I said it right, Dinelson Lamet. Then Kevin Gausman, Nathaniel Volte has some cheap options. But we'll start up top with Shane Bieber, 10,600. You guys know I'm an Indians fan, but I'm not being biased. He is one of the best pitchers in baseball. You can make a case that he is the best pitcher in baseball, especially this season. He has been absolutely amazing. And I mean, there's a very good chance he wins the Cy Young Award in the AL. And if we're just looking at his game log this season, I'll just read it off very quickly. I mean, he's been great. 41 points, 46, 29, 19, and 39.4. I mean, he's just been fantastic. And his best outing of the year was against a very good offense in the Twins. It wasn't just beating up on Detroit and KC. I mean, he had 46 points versus the Twins, and his strikeout numbers have been absolutely off the charts. I mean, he had a good strikeout rate last season, but I didn't think he was going to be like this much of a strikeout pitcher this season. He was at 14, 13, 8, 8, and 11. He's been over 100 pitches 3 times, and those other 2 times he was at 98, 97. He's got elite control. I mean, he limits the hard contact. He's been striking out guys at an insane rate. I don't see how we don't view Shane Bieber as the best pitching option on the slate. He gets a soft matchup here versus Pittsburgh. And you also get a park upgrade for pitching in Pittsburgh. Cleveland, it's more of a hitter's park. It's a little neutral, but it definitely favors some bats. And then if you're going to Pittsburgh, it's more of a pitcher's park here. And Vegas likes Shane Bieber as well. Only 3 runs against him, which is the lowest on the slate. 68% chance for a win. 8 strikeouts in Vegas. And like I said, it is a positive pitching park for Shane Bieber. His numbers last year were good, but I mean, I just told you how good he's been this season. So just take all these numbers and just make them better. It's just pretty much what you're getting from Shane Bieber. High strikeout guy that does have fantastic command. And, his one thing is he does give up some power to lefties, but I mean, this season he's just been super, super good. And this Pittsburgh lineup versus righties has been pretty horrendous this season. If we're just looking at their numbers, they are awful. 24% K rate, 117 ISO, 51 WRC plus, which is, I believe, the worst in the entire league versus righties. I could be wrong, but it's definitely very, very low. I mean, I thought the Rangers were one of the lowest yesterday on the slate when I was looking at it. They had a 68 WRC plus to righties. Well, Pittsburgh's all the way down to 51, so they've been awful. 243 WOBA. I love this spot for Shane Bieber. I mean, there's plenty of value bats on this slate, so I don't think it's going to be too much of an issue to fit him in. This is on a Coors Field slate, so we're not going to have 6K Springer, Altuve, and Bregman and those guys. So it shouldn't be too bad to fit him in. I think you can definitely spend up a pitcher today. Shouldn't be much of an issue because, the Padres are cheap, and I think they're interesting today, and there's some other offensive guys I like as well. So I do like Shane Bieber. He's your ace of the slate, and I'm going to make him the thumbnail for this video, I'm pretty sure. Then if you don't want to play Bieber for some reason, which I think you should, but if you don't want to, and I would expect him he's going to be high owned, so if you want to pivot, we have Clayton Kershaw here at 10,200. Now, he doesn't have the same strikeout upside that Shane Bieber does, and I honestly don't see why you don't want to play Shane Bieber, but if you don't, Clayton Kershaw does get a good matchup versus Seattle. If you're looking at their splits versus lefties last season, they're pretty, not last season, this season, because this is updated with the 2020 statistics. If you missed yesterday's video, this is this year's numbers, because I was using last year's, but I updated it. But they have a 25% K rate to lefties, only a 106 ISO, a 60 WRC plus, and a 250 WOBA. So they've been just about as bad versus lefties as Pittsburgh is versus righties. So both guys are in really good spots here, and the Dodgers should be able to get them a win. Only 3.3 runs against them, 69% chance for the win. Only 5.5 strikeouts in Vegas, but otherwise besides the strikeouts, he's been a pretty good pitcher so far this season. We're just looking at his 3 games. He scored 27, 9, and 28. Strikeouts have been 6 each and every single time. Now, he also doesn't have the pitch count that Shane Bieber does. Now, I don't think Kershaw is going to get over 100 pitches at any point here. He's been at 81, 85, 91. He might be around 90 to 95, but I mean, Shane Bieber could easily get 110 pitches in as long as he's on his game, which he's been on his game pretty much every single start this season. So definitely prefer Bieber, but if you want to pivot for some reason, I don't mind Clayton Kershaw. But for the most part, if you're spending all the way up, I would really just try to get the Shane Bieber. Then if you want to save some salary, I probably wouldn't end up playing Gray with a guy like Bieber and Kershaw because it might be just a little bit much in the salary department. And I'm really kind of trying to get Lamet as my SP2 because this is a really good spot for him. But I don't mind Sonny Gray here, 9,500. He's not priced like a guy like Bieber, but he's been pretty good this season. If we're just looking at his numbers, he has a 2.05 ERA, and I'll just read his game log off really quick. I mean, it's almost Shane Bieber, like 30, 39, 27, 12, and 34. I mean, he's just been fantastic this season. Matchup versus the Cardinals doesn't scare me too much. Yeah, they got a couple of good bats in the lineup like Matt Carpenter, Paul Goldschmidt, but for the most part, I think Sonny Gray is going to be pretty good here. He's just been super dominant this season. Vegas likes him too. He's a slight favorite, 6.5 strikeouts, 3.69 runs against him. It's also a positive he's not pitching in Great American Ballpark for certain, so he gets the park upgrade as well. And if you're looking at his numbers last year, they were really good. High ground ball pitcher, limits to hard contact, 29% strikeout rate, double-digit walk rate. But he's been great this season. I mean, the strikeouts have been at 9, 11, 8, 7, and 10. And if we're looking at the numbers for the Cardinals versus righties this season, now keep in mind they have missed quite a few games, so the sample size won't be as big as others, but they have a 23.9% K rate, 91 WRC plus, 170 ISO, kind of just pedestrian numbers here. So, I mean, I'd prefer to get up to a guy like Bieber, but if you can't, if you want to save some money, I don't mind Sonny Gray, who has similar upside. Now, getting into the SP2s here, because I don't think Lamet would be my SP1, especially with guys like Bieber, Kershaw, and Gray on the slate. So, I mean, if you want to spend up on bats, you could go Lamet as your SP1. I get it, but for the most part, he's probably going to end up being an SP2 option here. But I like him a lot versus the Rangers. We just saw Chris Paddock have success last night, and Lamet's been really, really good this season. Only a 1.59 ERA. And if I just read off his game log really quick, he's at 25, 17, 11, which is a rough game, but that was also against the Dodgers, which pretty much everyone gets a free pass versus the Dodgers because they crush righties, especially for a righty. But then after that, 37 points and then 25 points, and this is a pretty good matchup as a righty versus the Rangers. I talked about this yesterday in my video for Chris Paddock, that the Rangers have been awful versus righties this season. Now, I mean, they have some power lefties like Odor, Joey Gallo, and some other guys, but they strike out a ton. Now, if you're looking at the splits versus righties, this season only had 21% K rate to righties, but there's definitely strikeouts to be had in that lineup. I believe Paddock was at 5, which wasn't great. I was expecting more strikeouts from Paddock, but overall they do strike out quite a bit. And a 121 team ISO and only a 68 WRC plus, 282 WOBA. So I definitely like this spot for Lamet. He's been really good this season, and he's a favorite to be my SP2 in my lineup. And if I can make Bieber and Lamet work in my main lineup tomorrow, I would really like to do that because I think there's enough value to fit it in, and I do feel pretty comfortable with both. Now, his pitch count, the thing is, he doesn't go too deep into games, so you see him at 80, 91, 84, 83, and 60, or not 60, 81. Now, the strikeouts have been there for the most part, 8, 7, 2, 11, and 8. The 2 was against the Dodgers. Again, you get a free pass versus the Dodgers, but definitely a strikeout pitcher. Now, he's got to be a little efficient here because he doesn't go too deep into games, but it comes with the price discount as well. I mean, if he was throwing 100-plus pitches, I mean, he could be priced near 10K for being honest. So I like Lamet quite a bit. Definitely a strong SP2 candidate if you got the money. Last season, the strikeout rate was at 34%. Didn't really give him much hard contact, and just overall really good pitcher. So do like Lamet quite a bit. And if you can make him fit as your SP2, I like that. Now, getting into some cheaper options, if you do want to spend up a little bit on your bats, Kevin Gausman at 6,500. So I don't love the matchup here versus the Angels, but we did just see Johnny Cueto have success last night. And Gausman's been pretty good this year. I think he's still a bit underpriced for the way he's been pitching. I mean, just doing a quick glance at the game log, he was at 4 in his first game. Again, he was facing the Dodgers. You get a free pass versus the Dodgers. Then 16-16, then 22 versus the Dodgers, which is very, very impressive. Then he had 24 points versus Oakland. He's been striking out guys as well. 11 strikeouts, 6, 7, 8, and 2 in his first start. But pitch count was over 100 in the last one, and I don't mind him for the price tag. I think there's some upside here. Yeah, there's some good bats in this Angels offense for sure. You got Anthony Rendon, Mike Trout, who's obviously best player in baseball. And then you got Tommy La Stella, David Fletcher, Shohei Ohtani. So it's not an easy lineup to navigate through, but the price tag's fine for a guy that has been pitching very well this season. So that's pretty much all I got to say. I mean, we can look at the matchup so far for the Angels versus righties this year. It's not great. Only a 20% K rate, 217 ISO, 118 WRC plus, and 338 WOBA. I mean, I don't love the matchup, but if you need a cheap pitcher, there's not many options here, and Gausman's okay. I don't think he's going to get blown up. I don't think he's going to have an amazing game either. Then if you want to go all the way down, you have Nathaniel Volte at 5,900. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're probably telling me to stop picking on the Orioles, and I'm not really picking on the Orioles here. It's just mainly a price play, and I just don't think he's going to get absolutely blown up. I mean, I actually do have a couple of Orioles bats listed here because Volte does struggle with lefty power, and I think guys like Santander and Francisco are in pretty good spots, but I'm not expecting him to throw a complete game shutout here. I think he's probably going to end up giving up like 1 to 3 runs here, but I'm just kind of hoping he gets some strikeouts for the most part and just doesn't get blown up, which I don't think he's going to get blown up. Now, this isn't a great park for pitching in Baltimore. Boston's not a great park for pitching either, but Baltimore's certainly not as well. But I think this is a fine spot for Volte. Now, he's been a little up and down this season. Now, on his first start of the year, he did face Baltimore. He had 19.9 fantasy points, struck out 4 in 89 pitches. And then he had 9 versus the Mets, 10 versus Tampa, 23 versus Toronto. Then he kind of got killed versus the Yankees, giving up, 8 runs, and he just kind of got killed. Negative 4.6 points, but he was facing the Yankees, which I know there wasn't Giancarlo Stanton or Aaron Judge, so he doesn't get as much of a free pass, but still it was versus the Yankees. But this is a softer matchup versus the Orioles. Now, I'm not just picking on them. I'm not saying they're trash. I mean, I think over the course of the season they're not going to be a great offense, but they've been solid to start the year, so I'll give them some credit. But to righties so far this year, 21% K rate, 182 ISO, 324 over 104 WRC plus. Not bad numbers, but it's mainly just a price play here, and I'm kind of just hoping that Volte can pick up a win. So not expecting a lot, but doesn't have to do a lot either at this price tag. So I think at this point we'll just move on to the bats, and we'll start at catcher. And like I said, I'm not picking on the Orioles for the most part. It's just mainly a price play because I do think some of these lefties do grade out well, and that one of those lefties is Francisco, who should be leading off versus a righty. He was recently moved to the leadoff spot, and I like catchers that are hitting up in the top of the order, and I like Francisco quite a bit. He's always a guy that seems to take my pitchers deep. He's always just that one random guy that seems to do it. But if we're looking at his splits versus righties last season, I mean, obviously he doesn't really play much versus lefties, but 209 ISO to righties, 105 WRC plus, low batting average, high strikeout rate, but there's some power there. And if he's going to be leading off versus Volte, someone who did struggle with lefties quite a bit last year, at a 331 ISO given up, double-digit walk rate, 41% fly ball rate, 400 WOBA, also a great park for hitting. So I like Francisco at 3,700. Then if you want some cheaper options, we have Carson, Kelly, and Austin Barnes. Both are going to be facing left-handed pitchers, and they both get the platoon advantage there. Kelly, I mean, I prefer just going with Barnes here because he's much cheaper, and I'd expect him to be the chalk. I mean, he's only 2,600, and the Dodgers are going to be one of the better offenses on the entire slate. So I would assume most people are going to go with Barnes, but Kelly's fine versus a lefty. I mean, he had good splits versus lefties last season, 310 ISO, 182 WRC plus, 667 slugging, and a 356 batting average. So obviously much better numbers than Barnes has versus lefties, but I just like the team that Barnes is on better. But I still like Kelly here. Manea's not been great this season, so he's certainly viable. But Austin Barnes, I would assume he's going to be the chalk catcher for the most part. I mean, as long as he makes the lineup, but he should make the lineup versus a lefty. Just dirt cheap, 2,600. I like the Dodgers on the slate. One of the higher team totals at 5.16. Now, the Boston total's not out yet. I could see that one maybe being the highest, but as of right now, I believe the Dodgers are the highest at 5.16. Which does seem a little low for the highest team total on the slate, but no Coors Field, and there's not a ton of great offenses. I mean, there's some fine spots, but for the most part. But it would surprise me if Boston does get ahead of that. Not out yet, but it certainly could. But I like Austin Barnes quite a bit. Then dropping down to first base, I got like 4 options here. I'll start with Mitch Moreland at 4,800. So Asher Wojciechowski, I think that's how you say his name. I love saying his name though; it's really fun as long as I'm pronouncing it right. Wojciechowski, Woj, whatever you want to call him, Asher, whatever. He struggles with lefties. Now, he's not the worst pitcher in the world. Like, he doesn't really typically get blown up for the most part, but he does give us some lefty power. If we're looking at his splits last season, he had about a 25% carry to righties, but to lefties, 19% and a 287 ISO given up and a near 370 WOBA. Also, a lot of fly balls as well. So I do like the spot for the lefties on Boston. So guys like Mitch Moreland, Raphael Devers, Alex Verdugo do grade out as pretty strong plays on the slate. We know Moreland's great versus righties, so I like it. It's also a great hitter's park in Baltimore, and they're on the road, so you get the guaranteed ninth inning at bats as well. So if you get the money, don't mind Moreland. But they did price up Boston. They kind of priced him up almost Coors Field-like for the most part. So sucks we don't get him as good values like Devers. I remember in his last game, I think he was 4,400. Verdugo was 30-some hundred. Not the case this time. Carlos Santana, 4,100. He's been swinging a hot bat. I believe he's homered 2 days in a row now, and he gets a good matchup here versus Trevor Williams. Now, this is a big park, not huge, but it is a park downgrade for the bats from going from Cleveland to Pittsburgh and PNC, but I like Santana's price, and I think the Indians do make a decent stack on this slate. A 4.5 team total seems low. I'd assume that's going to rise as the day goes on. Now, Trevor Williams hasn't been horrendous, but he is someone that will struggle with left-handed bats, and the Indians got plenty of good left-handed bats. A lot of them are switch hitters on this team, but they're going to be throwing a lot of lefties at Trevor Williams. Let's see if I can name some off the top of my head. Cesar Hernandez, Lindor, Ramirez, Naquin, Santana. I'm forgetting someone off the top of my head, but you guys get the idea. There's a lot of good lefties on this Indians team. And at 4,100, I like this spot here for Carlos Santana. Eric Hosmer. So I'm not sure if I'm really in love with the Padres stack today, but I will say I got a lot of Padres listed, so I guess I am since I have them listed. But I don't love picking on Kyle Gibson. He's kind of just your average pitcher. Not like a guy that gets blown up for the most part, but the Padres come in a little cheap, so definitely on my radar, and especially if I'm going to be spending up for guys like Bieber and Lamet and those kind of guys, I'm going to have to find some value. And these Padres, that's a good lineup for sure. I mean, it's kind of loaded. Machado, Tatis, Hosmer, and some other good value bats, and Trent Grisham. So even though they're not in the best spot in the world versus Gibson, they're certainly playable. And Hosmer at 3,500 versus a righty, certainly have some interest there. 276 batting average versus them last season. 184 ISO, 102 WRC plus. Now, he was a ground ball machine last season, but he did fix his swing a little bit. He's getting some more some elevation on those hits. So I don't mind Eric Hosmer at 3,500. And then if you need an absolute punt option here, we have Kevin Crone at 2,200. He's got some fine splits versus lefties. He's going up against the lefty Sean Manaea, who's not been great this season now. Only a 4.1 implied team total here for Arizona, but he's just dirt cheap. And if you're looking at splits versus lefties, he had a 222 ISO. It was actually better versus righties last season, but he's going to be fine here. I mean, it's 2,200. You're pretty much just hoping for a hit and a run for the most part, or a walk and a run. Throw him in Crone if you need the savings. Then dropping down to second base, we got a few options here. Start with Max Muncy. He comes in at 5,000. Now, people probably shy away from the lefty-on-lefty matchup here, but I think the entire Dodgers lineup is in play. Now, I prefer the righties because they're really cheap for the most part. I will say the Dodgers are a worse team versus left-handed pitching. We just saw Marco Gonzalez look like a Cy Young candidate versus them last time. I think he struck out 9 and just absolutely destroyed the Dodgers, which sucked because I had all the Dodgers in that slate. So it was unfortunate, but Kikuchi, not a pitcher I'm too scared of. If you're looking at Kikuchi splits versus lefties, a 256 ISO given up, and versus righties, a 241 ISO given up. So pretty neutral splits. He'll give up power to both sides of the plate. He's a low strikeout pitcher, and versus the Dodgers, I think they should be able to tee off for the most part. And if we're looking at Muncy's splits, he's fine versus lefties and versus righties. Pretty much the same splits either way. He's actually a little bit better versus lefties in some categories. So I like Max Muncy. I mean, pretty much just a tournament option, but he's definitely fine. Cesar Hernandez, 4,500. He's better versus right-handed pitching if you're looking at his splits. Not a great hitter by any means, but he does have better splits versus righties on the screen. I'll have to read it off to you. You guys get the idea. And Trevor Williams, very low strikeout pitcher to lefties, only 12% K rate compared to 12 or 21% to righties. Gives up power to both sides of the plate. So I do like Cesar Hernandez as a lefty versus Trevor Williams. Forgot they were going against for a second. Then dropping down a little bit in the salary range, you have Kiki Hernandez at 3,400. Now last season he was actually better versus righties, but he's still someone we can target versus lefties. Now the problem is he's going to be hitting near the bottom of the order, but he's also eligible at shortstop as well. And if you just need a cheap Dodger bat, I don't mind Kike here versus Kikuchi. They have the highest team total on the slate currently. And even though the Red Sox might overtake that, they're still going to be one of the best offenses on the slate. And then another cheap Padre bat, Jake Cronenworth here at 2,500. He seems to be just a little bit too cheap, and it seems like he is every single slate. I don't know why he's this dirt cheap, because he's actually not been that bad this season. And if we're looking at Kyle Gibson's numbers versus lefties last year, 168 ISO, which is similar to righties, but strikeout rate does come down 5 percentage points. The walk rate goes up a little bit, and the WOBA goes up too. Now, he only gives up a 16% fly ball rate and a 48% ground ball rate, so don't love that, but I just like the price point here, and you get a cheap lefty on righty matchup, and I do think the Padres are interesting on this slate. Team total of only 4.5 right now, but I could see that rising, but they do make good DFS plays because of their price tags for the most part. Now dropping down to third base and shortstop, these positions are both loaded, but we'll start with Raphael Devers here at 5,400. If you just put aside salary, he's going to grade out as one of the best plays in the entire slate. I actually think he's my highest projected batter at the moment. But he gets a great spot here versus Asher Wojciechowski. I mean, just everything checks out. Devers is great versus righties. Asher is not good versus lefties. And if you're looking at the splits, Devers, amazing numbers here. 330 batting average to righties, 407 WOBA. You guys get the idea. Great numbers. Asher, much worse split. Well, not much worse. He's not that great versus either side of the plate, but a higher ISO given up and a higher WOBA and high fly ball rate as well. So I like Raphael Devers. Checks in as pretty much the best play on the slate. If you want a tournament option, I like Jose Ramirez, 5,300. Like if I've got the money for 5,300 for JRAM, I'll find the extra 100 for Devers in cash games or just in a single entry tournament. But if you're making multiple lineups and you're stacking the Indians, I don't mind JRAM because I like all the lefties here versus Trevor Williams. He's good versus both sides of the plate, and he certainly has a very high ceiling. And then Justin Turner, 4,900. He's going up against the lefty. I wish he was a little bit less expensive, but I like the Dodgers righties for the most part. The lefties are playable, but I do prefer the righties, and Justin Turner's got elite splits versus lefties, near 300 ISO, near 300 batting average, just overall very solid numbers, and a near 40% fly ball rate, so he's keeping the ball in the air too. I hate guys that just get a bunch of ground balls. I mean, sometimes you got to live with it, but don't mind Justin Turner there. I do like the Dodgers a lot on this slate. And then Manny Machado, I prefer him versus righties. His splits compared to lefties and righties is pretty drastic for the most part. You can look at it on the screen. You're going to see red bars to the righties, green bars to the lefties. But like I said, I don't know why. I mean, the total isn't great for the Padres, and the Gibson's not a trash can pitcher, but I'm kind of gravitating to some of these Padres. So they're interesting. I prefer these cheap lefties for the most part. But if you're full stacking, you can't leave guys like Machado and Tatis off. And we just saw Machado, I believe he got a walk-off grand slam last night too, so he's got that going for him. He's at a fair price point, and Gibson's kind of neutral to both sides of the plate. And then dropping down to short, and like there actually wasn't a cheap third baseman that I listed. I don't think I have any listed that are eligible at third base, so I'm probably end up spending up at third base. But if there's another value option, I will have that posted on, like obviously my spreadsheet on Patreon. But it looks like a spend up position for the most part. Then dropping down to shortstop, we have some good spend-up options and a pretty good pump play. But we'll start with Frankie Lindor at 5,200. I prefer him versus right-handed pitchers, and Trevor Williams is not great versus lefties. I think the Indians make a decent GPP stack. Probably won't go there in cash games for sure because I don't love the park, and only have a 4.5 implied team total, but I don't mind Lindor here. He's just a little bit expensive. Then Tatis, 5,100. I mean, he's been pretty much one of the best players in baseball. I mean, you could even make an argument he's the best player in baseball currently. I would not really say that. I really wouldn't give anyone that title over Mr. Mike Trout. But, I mean, Tatis is, I mean, him and Mookie Betts have been the best players in the NL for the most part. And Tatis, I mean, he had another homer last night, and he's been fantastic. He's a fun player to watch. He's electrifying. I mean, he looks cool. He's got a cool last name. I mean, he's got those cool dreadlocks going on. He's just a really fun player to root for, and you know, I love watching him play. And Tatis, he's definitely interesting tonight. I mean, Gibson, I'm not loving picking on Gibson, but I got a lot of Padres listed here, and they're certainly interesting, and they have a powerful offense. I mean, Hosmer, Machado, Tatis, Trent Grisham, and some decent low-end bats that hit at the bottom of the order. So it's a fun lineup for sure. And Tatis, he crushes lefties, but he also crushes righties as well. Last season, a 50% ground ball rate to righties, which I don't love, but I mean, he's been great this season, so I definitely think you can look at Tatis. Just a little bit expensive. Then Corey Seager, 4,800. People will shy away from the lefty-on-lefty matchup, but Seager's been great to start the season. I mean, he's got over a 300 batting average, just overall really good numbers. I like the Dodgers quite a bit, and Kikuchi pretty much has a neutral split, so it's not like I'm too concerned there. I prefer Seager versus righties, but I like all the Dodgers here for the most part. And if you want a cheap option, Chris Taylor, 3,100. I could see him definitely getting some ownership. He's eligible in the outfield as well, but if you just want a cheap Dodger righty, Chris Taylor's there for you. He's got some decent splits versus lefties. Then going down to the outfield, not as packed as it usually is, but some good options here. I got a few expensive guys, a few mid-range, and a couple of punt plays. But we'll start with Mookie Betts and Cody Ballinger. I mean, they're both similar plays. Now, Cody Bellinger is 800 cheaper, so it's easier to fit him in. But Mookie versus a lefty, Kikuchi's not that great versus either sides of the plate. So, obviously, Mookie Betts is a fine play. I don't think I'll go too in-depth. It's Mookie Betts, one of the top players in baseball. Certainly playable. He's one of the favorites to win the NL MVP right there with Tatis. And then Cody Bellinger, 5,200. People might shy away from the lefty-on-lefty matchup, but that's not something I would really do. Kikuchi gives that more power to lefties, and Bellinger has a great numbers versus lefties. 316 ISO last season. Now, he's been kind of skidding so far this season, but he did homer last night, which might give him some momentum. So I do like Bellinger at the cheap price point. I say cheap, but 5,200 for Bellinger. He's certainly a guy that could be around 6K, which we did see quite a few times last season. So that's why I said cheap, but I realized 5,200 is not that cheap. Then Alex Verdugo. I was wishing he was going to be a little bit cheaper, and I got to fix Pollock again. It's not picking up the no dots in the age or the periods in AJ. But Alex Verdugo, I was wishing he was going to be cheaper, but he's still going to be one of the better plays in the entire slate. You still get him at a decent price point. I wish he was in the 3K range, but I think that's just being a little bit greedy. But he's fine versus right. He's going to be leading off versus Wojciechowski, and love all the lefties versus him. So Verdugo definitely checks out as a good play. I have some interest in Eovaldi, but I mean, I can't ignore how good Anthony Santander has been. He comes in at 4,300, and he's been one of the best hitters in baseball currently, especially in the AL. And if we're looking at Santander's splits versus right-handed pitching, he's better versus lefties, but still fine. Over 200 ISO and okay numbers, but he's just been great this season. And Eovaldi was someone that will struggle with lefties last season. Just gave him a ton of power versus them. I talked about that earlier, so don't mind Santander and Cisco from the Baltimore Orioles, but for the most part, I'm not going to be like trying to stack them. And then one of the best plays on the slate, in my opinion, AJ Pollock at 3,900. Again, I'm going to have to save some money if I'm playing guys like Bieber and Lamet. So I like a lot of these cheap outfielders. So Pollock and Grisham are grading out as one of the better plays in the entire slate for me. I also like Verdugo. So I don't think I'm going to be spending up in the outfield. Probably spend up at third base and potentially shortstop. But for the other positions, we're probably looking at value spots and catcher as well. But I like Pollock. He's great versus lefties. Kikuchi's not great versus the other side of the plate. Dodgers taking as one of the best stacks. And Pollock's got some good splits versus lefties. So definitely like him. Trent Grisham, 3,100. I'm not sure why he's this cheap. Like, these guys got priced like they're facing Lance Lynn, like they were last night, and that's not the case. They're facing Kyle Gibson, who not that great. He got beat up by Seattle recently too, and Trent Grisham leading off at 3,100. This just seems too cheap. He's been really good this season, and I think he's gonna end up being really popular. And you could make a case for him to be one of the better plays on the entire slate, just value wise. So I like Trent Grisham a lot. I like Pollock a lot too. I mean, there's a good chance these guys could end up making my main lineup. Then Josh Naylor, like I said, these Padres, I don't love. I mean, Kyle Gibson's not a trash can out there, but these guys are too cheap. Grisham at 3,100, Josh Naylor at 2,400. You got Hosmer at 3,500. I mean, Naylor's not great, but if you're looking at splits versus righties, they're okay. 176 ISO, he's been okay this season. Mainly just the price here. Then Tim LeCastro, 2,400, should be leading off versus the lefty in Chamonix. We just saw him lead off last night versus the lefty, so I would assume that would not change. Now, keep in mind, there's always the potential for this game to get postponed because of the poor air quality in California right now. And that game was actually being questioned to get canceled last night. Obviously, that did not happen. But if it's worse tomorrow, which it very well could be, just keep in mind that it could end up getting postponed. So be on the lookout for that. But I don't mind LeCastro here. I mean, he's not a great hitter, but leading off at 2,400, okay splits versus lefties. My name has not been great this season, so he's certainly playable. But that's going to be it for the video, guys. I hope it was helpful. If it was, remember to leave a like. If you're new to the channel, hit the subscribe button. It really helps me out. Really appreciate it. Check out the NASCAR video that I'm going to be posting today if you haven't already. Although I haven't recorded it yet, but I assume by the time most of you are watching this, it should be up. But yeah, appreciate you guys watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.